Welcome back, everybody. So, listen, many of us have found different ways to cope during this pandemic. For some of you, many of you, it's banana bread making or maybe sourdough. For others, it's Animal Crossing. And for another group, it is gardening as a way of coping. So, here to give us tips and tricks to get us all set up, if that is your self care of choice, he is the founder of Epic Gardening, and that is Kevin Espiritu, joining us from San Diego. Great to have you with us.
How's it going, guys? Great to be here.
Now, Kevin, you run your own gardening business. How has COVID impacted the gardening market in general?
Yeah, it's been really, really crazy. Normally in the gardening world, your spring and summer are your busy seasons anyways, sometimes 2 to 3 times busier. But with COVID, with everyone stuck at home looking for things to do, Animal Crossing, baking, gardening, we're seeing seed companies getting sold out, nurseries getting sold out. The products I sell at Epic Gardening, or just the attention into gardening, has completely skyrocketed. I'm talking 8, 10 times as much interest. I think here in America, there's something like 16 million new gardeners, and that's new gardeners on top of the normal amount of new gardeners that would be in the market.
Well, I noticed exactly what you were talking about. I was out on my bike last week looking to fill my pots on my deck. And compared to years past, it was scarce to find herbs and plants to do that. So for people who, I managed to do it, I'm okay. But for people who maybe still have work to do, what sort of advice do you have for them to help them to source plants right now?
So I have a couple tips. The first tip is to just get in touch with people in your community. You can hop on one of those apps that connects you to people in the neighborhood. Chances are pretty good there's going to be a gardener around who might want to spare some seeds, or maybe they want to spare a couple starts for you. But another really nice tip is if you call your local nursery and you just ask them when they get their deliveries in, you can make sure that you're the first person in line.
So let's talk about where we begin. So someone's like, yeah, you know what? I kind of want to spruce up my yard. What's the first step?
Sure. So if you want to spruce your yard up for more of an ornamental look and just have something look a lot more fresh, the first thing you want to do is just come in with your pruning snips or your shears and just clean up all of the dead plants, all of the diseased plants, a lot of the debris. You can throw it in your compost so you don't waste it, but just a simple refresher is going to do a lot for you. And then if we're talking about an edible garden, getting something like a simple planter, especially if it's your first time gardening. A lot of people go really aggressive and they go really, really big in their first year. But if you start with something really simple like a railing planter or just a small raised bed, you can spruce your yard up and then you can get a bunch of edible produce. I mean, these herbs right here would probably cost $4 or $5 at the market, and I can just grow them for free right here.
So Mel's got a lovely yard. I've got a lovely deck. I feel really lucky that we have these green spaces. But what about people who don't have a green space at home? What tips do you have for them?
Sure, yeah. So for people who are in an apartment or a condo, they don't have a balcony, they don't have a patio, there's a couple different options for you. So the first thing you can do, if you're more of an ornamental person and you want just the beauty of plants, is you can do something really simple like this. Just get a little shelf. This is a leaning bookshelf I got off Craigslist, and you can throw a bunch of houseplants in there and boom, you have a beautiful space. Now, if you want something edible, what you can do is you can get little simple trays like this, and you can take a packet of seeds that you would normally grow to their full potential outside, and you can sprinkle them really heavily on the surface of that soil, and they'll grow up kind of like those old chia pets. And then from there, you grab your pruning shears or your snips, you come through, and you have a nice micro salad. And what's really funny about that is chefs at restaurants buy these micro salads for quite a bit of money, and you can grow them for a really, really low cost right here at home.
That's really, really neat. I want to stick with the
Yeah.
food thing because I've been actually trying to avoid grocery stores as much as possible. I still want to eat fresh foods. And you're saying that we could actually or should consider growing our own food. And it's not going to take you 3 or 6 months. You're saying we can do some of this in under a month.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, can you grow a big squash or a big pumpkin in a month? Definitely can't. But there's a lot of different things that you can grow. So I kind of think about it from easiest to hardest, right? So the first thing that's the most easy is something like sprouts. So if you got a bunch of bean seeds, put them in a jar, put a little water in there for a little bit, soaked them up and drained it, you'd have some bean sprouts coming up. And that's food. And that's food that's pretty nutritious and you can eat at home. Now, if you go the next level up, you get into that microgreens thing that I was just talking about, where you can sprinkle lettuce mix, radish mix, peas, sunflowers. All of these grow really quick. You can probably get 2 crops of those out in a month.
I love that. Now, Kevin, you also say maybe not to throw your banana peels, your coffee grounds, your eggshells into the compost because you can use them with the garden.
Yeah, you totally can. So first of all, let's go with the eggshells. So here are a couple eggs that a friend of mine actually gave to me, speaking of community and connecting with your food. But when I'm done eating these eggs, what a lot of people will do is they'll just toss the eggshell in the trash. And eggshells actually contain quite a bit of nutrients that even have some organic matter, but they take a long time to break down. And so what I like to do is I'll save all my eggshells, I'll toss them in a blender, blend them up really fine, and then I just throw that in my soil or I throw that in my compost bin, and that'll work into the soil and improve it over time. Then you get into the banana, probably the most ubiquitous food scrap that everyone wants to try to repurpose. And the easiest way to work with this is just chop it up. You can bury it directly in your soil, or again, you can throw it in your compost. And then finally, probably my favorite one, the one that I drink probably way too much of, are coffee grounds. So I've got some coffee grounds right here, hard to see, but these guys, a lot of people will say, oh, you can't compost coffee grounds because they're too acidic, right? Coffee is an acidic drink. The thing to remember is after you've processed the grounds, the acidity is in the coffee that you just drank. The beans actually contain quite a bit of nitrogen, and you can throw these just directly on the soil or again in the compost bin to just slowly build and improve your soil over time.
Oh my gosh, I'm
Wow.
so doing that.
Love
I
it.
drink as much coffee
Me
as you do,
too.
Kevin. I want to keep this excitement going, and I'm hoping to pass this excitement on to a new generation. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I really want to get her involved in nature, and gardening seems like a really easy place to start. So how would you recommend that parents do that?
Yeah, gardening is a fantastic way to start. It's so visual. They can really connect from start to finish, especially if you grow some of those fast growing crops that we just talked about. But what I did a couple years back that really seemed to resonate with kids is you take a 2-liter bottle, you strip the label off of it so it's completely clear. Then when the bottle starts to kind of curve down and go straight, you cut right at that point and flip that part upside down. So now you have a little basin and the top is now on the bottom. You can fill that with soil, you fill the bottom with water, and then what you'll do is you'll take a little piece of old t-shirt or cloth and run it from the bottom through the hole into the soil. So now what's happening is the water is wicking upwards through that material into the soil. So it's kind of like a little self-watering container. And then your kid, maybe they don't like vegetables. Well, if they grew it, chances are pretty good they're going to like it.
Ooh,
That
good
sounds amazing.
trick.
Yeah, I want to do it.
There's the exciting part of gardening, and then there is the relaxation part of it. And you say that it's a really easy fix to add some zen and relaxation into your gardening.
So one of the great ways to do that is grow really soothing plants. So something like a lavender, a bunch of different varieties. It's relatively easy to grow. What you want to do with lavender and really any plant is just respect where it came from. When I say where it came from, I mean where that plant naturally evolved. And so for something like lavender that wants a lot of sun, it wants to be watered but not overwatered, and you want to give it about 2-3 feet of space between, give it a heavy prune a couple times a year.
I feel really happy with that answer because my pots, what I did find was lavender and herbs. And I feel really lucky that I found them and they're in my pots. So how can I make sure that they stay thriving all summer long?
Sure. So I've got a couple really good pot hacks for you. So the first one is this right here. This is called a smart pot or a grow bag. And so you can see it doesn't look like a normal pot. Here's a normal terracotta pot, and here's this funky floppy thing right here. And what's nice about this is it solves one of the major problems of this style of pot, where, you know, you put a plant in a pot and then it grows for a while, and when you pull it out of the pot, it's like a root ball full of pot-shaped roots. That's not that great for a plant. And what happens with this guy is once the roots kind of get to the edge of this, the tips of the roots will die, which sounds bad, but it's actually good because it sends a signal back to the plant and says, hey, create a more diverse fibrous root structure. So these guys really help if you struggle to grow things in containers, but not everyone has access to those. So I got a couple more tips for you. So another one here, this is just kind of a fun one. Most of these pots have drainage holes on the bottom, which allow water to come out so you don't overwater. But sometimes too much soil comes out. So what I like to do sometimes is I'll throw a little coffee filter in the bottom, and that helps soil stop going through and water can still go through. Now, let's say you're going on vacation for a couple days and you want like a little bit of buffer in your watering. What I've done here is I've got natural sponges. So this is just a natural sponge. It was old. I cut it up and I put some in the bottom of the pot, maybe to about here or so. So now when I water, that sponge gets full. But then the soil dries out. And again, kind of like that hydroponic bottle we talked about, the water will wick back upwards. So you can kind of leave for a couple days and you don't have to worry about your plant dying.
This has been so cool, both for inside and out. Kevin, thank you so much for these great tips.
No problem.
And everybody, we'll be right back right after this.